Greetings to everybody. On this particular video I'm going to be working with the theme of semi-abstraction. And it's really incredible, but my love for realism and my love for abstraction come together in this 2-hour video where we're going to be dealing with semi-abstraction. My natural instinct is to paint realistically. Ever since I started painting a long time ago, I particularly like realism. And then I just developed this love for abstraction, and now I find that somewhere in between is a perfect blend. So when I'm working with when I want to work in a semi-realistic or semi-abstract theme, what I do is it's a combination of pushing and pulling. So if it gets too abstract, then I add some recognizable subject matter. But if it gets too realistic, then I tend to break it down into more design elements. So let's see what happens in the next 2 hours, and I hope you find this a subject that you've been thinking about working with and might decide to try. In my first demonstration, I'm going to be working with butterflies. Now, I've always thought butterflies were kind of a hokey thing to paint. But you know, I have learned that really butterflies have great symbolism. They mean transformation and hope for so many people, particularly in the children's ward of the cancer unit. And then one day I came to my shop and I went to open the door and I looked down, and here was this perfect butterfly just laying there. And about 2 days later, I went to get in my car and there was another butterfly just sitting there, perfect condition. So I decided maybe somebody's talking to me and I should paint butterflies. So hokey or not, I'm going to be painting with the theme of butterflies. And here's another interpretation here in a vertical format. And you can see the first one I showed you had cooler colors. This one has warmer colors. And you can also see that I've added in here some stamping. Some of the textural elements that are here were done with stamping. And then my second demonstration is going to involve abstracted landscape. As you can see here, this is an interpretation. Recently I was in France and we went to the Peshmeral caves. And it was such an incredible experience. When we came back, we decided to try our luck at interpreting what we saw. So we did these semi-abstract interpretations with these spotted horses and a lot of the wonderful textures that were in the cave. We were quite pleased with our results. Here you can see this is meant to be kind of an abstracted landscape with landforms and white shapes moving through. Here again, very simplified, but again the idea of landforms moving back. And then this one is kind of a semi-abstract, semi-realistic interpretation of rocks combined with some collage. These are actual photographs here. And then as I painted right into the photographs in an attempt to kind of connect. So you can see the movement up here going through the collage piece, connecting, over here moving, connecting. This was really fun to do. Here's another, rocks are a favorite theme of mine. Here you can see I decided to dissect the painting into some shapes. So I simply took pencil and ruler and made this simple form, and then as I started pulling in a little more realism to make these look like rocks, I also connected the dark shapes so they move through the picture and out again. And you can see here as they're going across, almost like weaving, I brought the darks up to the edge, left this color the way it was, and then picked up the dark again over here and moved it. And I did a similar thing here. Came down, ended the darks along the line, and then flipped it here, picked up the darks over here and moved them across. So it's really kind of fun to work with a theme, such as rocks maybe underwater, but then to give it this semi-abstract interpretation. And this is really one of my very favorite paintings. I think I'm going to have to hang on to this one for a while. And it's the same idea. I started out with a totally abstract beginning, and then as I started to move in with this little hint of realism, I did it through the darks and the negative painting. So you can see I was, again, moving the viewer's eye through the picture so that it touched off here, touched off here, touched off over here. And as I move into an area, for example, in here where the colors are in those warm purpley colors, that's the color I used for my darks. As I moved over here into these kind of turquoisey colors, I moved into the dark turquoise colors. And then up in here, I moved into the purples and then back into the turquoise. So I just kind of changed, let the painting tell me which color to use as I'm directing it. And the next theme I want to work with is semi-abstract flowers. This is just a very simple interpretation here, but you can see it still says poppies without very much elaboration. And then this one here, again, we're working with the shape within a shape, and again working dark against light, light against dark. Here you can see as we're moving along, it's dark on this side against the light, and as we move up, it becomes dark on the outside against the light. So we're going to have a little fun with that play of dark against light, light against dark, warm against cool, and so on. Well, we're ready to begin our first demonstration. Here's another painting in progress. I still have to develop some more lights and darks, and in this one I'm actually working mixed media. I just started adding some acrylics, but I basically started this out with transparent watercolor. And in this lesson with the butterflies, I plan to do collage too. Now this was just a fluke. I can't stop painting butterflies. I'm getting obsessed about them. And I've been recently doing more and more work with acrylics. So this doesn't really have too much to do with our lesson today, but I just wanted to share it with you. This is another theme, carrying out the butterflies, only this time using acrylics. So you can see I came in with a lot of whites later, and a lot of the colors you're looking at here are opaque. And another butterfly. Had no idea what this was going to be when I started the painting, and I looked at it and said, oh my gosh, there's another butterfly. So this was what I was working with, and then I came in with the black to identify the shapes of the butterflies. So we're going to get started with our actual demo. As you can see, I've done a little drawing ahead of time. I'm planning to do the two butterflies interacting with some kind of floral shapes in the background. And when I start these, what I do is I work with little sketches. I kind of like just doing them in black and white and in value. See, there's the white value, a mid-tone value, and a dark value. So these are some sketches from some of the other paintings you just saw. And this is a sketch for the painting that I'm doing today. So I saved this idea of developing some of the values. Okay, so I have this marker. It's actually a sepia tone, and it's 100% dark. So what I'm going to do is just simply come in here and mark in some of the darks. And because this end of the butterfly is quite dark, I'm going to end up putting lights behind that. And I've got to decide where I want to have. I think I'll leave the butterfly light in here, so I probably will develop some darks under here. And then I'll carry those darks down and connect them to the edge of the paper. And then maybe we can pull that dark up here, popping out the body of the butterfly here. So you can see how we're starting now to form connections with the edge of the paper. We have now formed a vertical connection that's coming through, linking with the butterfly, moving across, and coming over here. So now I think it would be good to form another connection here that would come over here and link with the edge of the paper. So what we really need to do now is think about how can we weave this little dark pattern back and forth and connect to the other side. So it's pretty simple. And I may not follow this religiously, but I think it's a good exercise to do some of these little value studies. Now, one of the things I tend to do is make all my corners light. Maybe I better come down here and at least make one corner a little darker. That feels better. Okay, so we've got enough information now to get started. I'll collect these. Put the one I'm going to work with right here. And we're ready to start. I just simply took an HP pencil and quickly drew in some of these shapes. And again, I don't have to follow them religiously, but I just want to facilitate the video, to move it along more quickly. Now I am going to be using some collage papers. These are store-bought archival collage papers. This one has a string in it. I just love that particular one. This is the same one in more of a purple color. And then these are some other rice papers that have other strings and a whole different feel to them. And these are very colorful. They almost take over the painting if you're not careful. So I'm planning to use these in just small doses just to add a little accent. I'm not sure which ones I'll be using, but I did select some that I thought would go with the theme. And then these are actual flowers here that I may rip up and use some of these colors too. So we'll keep these handy. My favorite unruh paper to use, which is another archival and absolutely delicate, beautiful oriental paper. It actually comes from Thailand. This is only 10 gram, very lightweight, highly fibered, and very white paper. So you'll see me dropping this in after we get some color down. The color on the paper will absorb into this, and this will form darks. So I plan to use this more than anything. And then I plan to use some of the specialty papers just for a little added excitement. So we're going to start by wetting the back of the paper first. So I'm using my largest brush. This happens to be a 3-inch hockey brush. When I flip it over, now I have the paper that I've already identified as the front of my paper. I check the watermark. When I can read Arches France, which is what I'm using, 140-pound Arches. When I can read that watermark, I start by wetting the back first, flipping it once, and then wetting the front. And I always do that because, you know, I've used this board for so many paintings. I don't want to get any of that paint, that old paint, staining the front of my paper. I think I'm going to start with the background, and that will give the really excess water a little time to settle in, so that when I come back to paint the butterflies later, they will have calmed down a little bit. But I don't care if the background's kind of wild and crazy. So I'm just going to come in here and start putting in some gorgeous colors. This is a new color I've just added to my palette. It's called Quinacridone Coral. It's a Daniel Smith color. You can see it really moves. Whoa. Wow, is that moving? And my palette is a very simple palette. I like to work with the round palette because I set the colors up like a color wheel, put harmonious colors next to each other and complements across. And it's basically a primary palette. I mostly have pure yellows and pure reds and pure blues, and I do have, as you can see, a couple of oranges and one purple. And the only green on the palette is phthalo green, which I use for mixing darks. And because I let my paint dry in the palette, I'm just going to take my fine mister right now, and I'm going to mist the surface so it'll activate the colors. Whew, boy did that move. I think I'm going to see what happens here. So we're going to come in with just a little bit more of this lovely pinky color. And I'm just suggesting now some flowers. See, and these flowers are probably going to be growing upwards, maybe doing something up here. And I'm going to start closing in on the butterfly too. So when I get close to the butterfly, I'm not going just close, I'm going exactly up to it. And I want to touch off the edge of the paper too, very important. Don't just get close to the edge of the paper, touch it off. Well, this is so much, this color went so far, I can't believe it. I'm actually going to take and lift a little color right now, because I don't want to lose my lights on my butterfly. So I'm just simply going to lift out a little bit of that. It's a very soft color. I think I want to carry some of this lovely pinky color between them, off the edge over here. Maybe we can even go up off the edge here. Now we want to start thinking harmonically. I'm going to go next door. This happens to be quinacridone rose. This color doesn't move as much as the coral, and it's just a little bit different look. So now we're going to go a little more pinky. Let's move it up here. Again, I have no idea what flowers these are. I'm just trying to suggest flowers. Keep this semi-abstract theme going. Let's bump into the butterfly here too. And then it's always a good idea to bless the painting too. Have a little, almost like a little airbrush action. Another thing I want to do is to start suggesting some of the greens. But instead of mixing a green, I'm going to put down yellow, and then I'm going to put blue on top and let it become a green. And then meanwhile, some of this will become orange. So I'm basically going to work with a lot of primary colors and let them mix on the paper. This happens to be a Windsor yellow, but it could be any primary yellow of your choice. So I'm kind of thinking now about some kind of green things that could be growing. If I was a realist, I'd research what exactly this butterfly eats and what they would be landing on. But I'm not too worried about that. I just want to suggest some shapes here. I'm trying to save some whites. And then because the paper is so wet, I frequently will lift it up like this, drop it down, and that helps it remain flat. Lift it, set it down. So now I'm ready to come in with some blue. And I think I'm going to try my manganese blue. Clean up my palette a bit here. Clean my brush. Let's start over. Such a pretty blue. One thing about manganese that I enjoy is it granulates. So I'm hoping to get a little of that granulation. I think that would be pretty. So now as I put this color over the yellow, obviously I'm going to get some green. So I pretty much have been getting just greens at this point. Then as it goes over the pink, it's going to gray down. And if I come with this color and put it into a white area, I'll get the blue. Okay, I'm going to move down here. Oops, I notice I'm getting a few hard edges down here, and I'm not ready for hard edges yet. So I'm going to take my fine mister. This is a spray bottle that has a very narrow inner stem, and as I spray with it, I get this extremely fine mist. So with just a little mist, I'll be able to keep the painting as wet as I want. Okay, so right now I'm starting to think about maybe some little dark movements coming up, connecting. These movements can come down and connect with the bottom of the page. But whenever I start doing this, I always like to link them together. See, how does this move and link together? Notice I have another dry spot here. When you see that, just show them who's boss. I don't want this paper to dry yet, because I'm going to be, here's another spot. I'm going to be dropping in collage papers, and I want the paint to be wet when I drop that paper in. Okay, now I'm ready to add some wonderful color in the butterflies themselves. So I'm just going to come in with some nice bright yellows. And I'm going to use the brightest color on the butterflies because they're the most important subject. Notice I switched to a smaller brush. Now I'm working with about a number 8. Okay, now I want to think harmonically. I just used some bright yellow. This happens to be quinacridone gold. It's a beautiful, really pretty yellow. And it's got a lot of intensity. So this will give us just a little different look. And I want some of these circles here to be white or almost white, so I'm negatively painting around them. Then I think I'm going to pull a little bit of this gold again up here, out towards the end of the wing. Then as I move down, I think I'm going to go into a little brighter color, more of an orange. So we're going to keep the butterfly in the warm colors, going from kind of an orange into a yellow into that more golden yellow. And I think I might even take some of this really bright quinacridone coral here and warm it up a bit. So here too, I think I'll pull that warmer color down here closer to the body. So we have one warm butterfly done. Now this other butterfly, I wanted to reverse. I wanted the lines to stay white, and whereas this one I was going to make the linear parts dark, just to have a little variety. And I noticed that a lot of color did run into the butterfly here. So again, I'm going to take my flat brush. It's a very good lifting brush. I'm going to just lift away a little of that extra color. So if you find too much color is moving into your subject, just simply lift it away. Just takes a minute. Because if we're going to stay with truly transparent watercolor, we're not going to be adding white to this. So if you want to save the whites, the best way to do that is to simply lift them away. And the best way to do that is with this flat, about a 1 inch, half an inch would work too. See, he's actually got a body down here that I think I forgot and covered it up. So there we go. Okay, now I'm ready to come in and play with some darks on this one. Although I would like to get a little bright color, I think I'm going to put a little bit of bright color right over here. This is my Scarlet Lake. This is probably the brightest orange you're ever going to see. So I'm just going to flash a little of that in here. And maybe I'll brighten it up with a little yellow too. Oh, that felt good. And I was also thinking about maybe adding a little purple to this butterfly. This is actually a store-bought purple here, my permanent magenta. Now, I'm going to clean up my palette here and I'm going to make a very dark color. So I'm going to take my alizarin crimson and I'm going to mix it with phthalo green. Now, phthalo green is a man-made color. Very seldom uses color all by itself. But when you take alizarin crimson and mix it with phthalo green, you get black. And so this is going to be my darkest dark here. You can see it's still pretty wet. It still wants to move a lot. And I really do want it to move a little bit. So be sure you don't work with a brush that's too big, or it's going to be just filling up. Like I say, I'm working with this relatively small brush, and I'm working with extremely thick paint. I'm just going to start having some fun here. Designing in a few of the darks here on the butterfly. And nobody knows what kind of butterfly this is, so I can do anything I want. I think I might even lift away a little of this color here that's getting a little away from me. There, that's better. I had too much water in that first application. It just got carried away. Now I can make this dark warmer or cooler. Right now I'm going to make it a little bit warmer. I'm going to add a little more alizarin crimson to it. And as I start playing around in here, it's going to be a warmer dark. And then I'm going to come over here and paint in some of these shapes. I'll stay with the warmer version. I'll go into a little cooler version on this outer part here. So this is fun. This is the reason I decided to draw first. I didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to look at a photograph. I just basically wanted to play. And so by having a few of these shapes indicated here, it just gave me a little bit of an idea what I wanted. kind of scary. Cool. Do we want to give him a dark eye? Yeah, why not? Maybe a little dark definition here. Person shouldn't have this much fun. Now I'm ready to put a little definition in the other butterfly too. So again, I'm going to go into my same combination of phthalo green, alizarin crimson, more alizarin. I'm going to keep it a little bit warmer. And see, a lot of these guys, these shapes here can be outlined with a dark. Ooh, I like what happens when it runs like that. That is cool. That's what we like. Surprises are good. It probably wouldn't hurt to do a little outlining over here too. And maybe even show some of the lines coming down. To start finding out what these different butterflies are. Oh, look what's happening over here. Now, if you don't want that much looseness, if you feel uncomfortable with that much definition disappearing, just wait a little bit longer for the water to settle into the paper. Okay, I'm ready now to get out my oriental papers and start dropping those in. Maybe I better just outline this top one here. Now the first paper I'm going to work with is the Unru. This is that really lightweight, oh I love this paper. It's only 10 grams. When you drop this onto the surface, it will absorb the color and it will become darker. Now you can see it's starting to dry a bit out here. So with just a little spray from my fine mister, it's starting to absorb the color now. It's going to start becoming darker. So I'm now thinking about how I want to move the viewer's eye through the paper. I want to touch off the edge here and there. I'll just give this a little spray. It seems to have dried a bit. Yay, now we can kind of have, if I drop it into the pink, it's going to obviously turn into a lovely pink shade, a little darker value. If I drop it into this darker value area, it's just going to simply become a much darker value than it is. So I like to start on the bottom and move through the picture. Now when I get to the edge of the butterfly, then I've got this straight edge here. So I'm actually going to use that straight edge to my advantage to form the edge of the butterfly. Then I'm going to take little small pieces and use that as a connecting. It's another straight edge. I'll use it for that edge of the butterfly. Then we'll take a series of little pieces here and set them down and connect them. I'm amazed. That is so wet, and now look, this is drying on me. So I'm always thinking about how do these shapes connect. Always thinking about that. So here's another straight edge. There is a little scalloping here. So I'm going to put this on this edge of the butterfly. Another little piece over here. So we're going around the corner. Now we're touching the edge. I'm ready to move up here. Let's see what happens when we do this. We'll put it around this edge. Then we'll move it in an upward movement. We'll do a series of little shapes, connecting, moving, connecting. See if we can connect all the way to the edge of the paper there. Good. That's what we like. Now if the paper isn't absorbing the color, then it just needs a little help. That's what that mister's for. And we'll move right through the center here with some papers. Oh, how fun. Little sections here and there. It's sort of like painting with paper. Hardly doing anything but setting these into the color, and I like the results. I haven't really put any of this paper on the butterflies. I think what I'm going to do is save that paper with the strings on it to put on the butterflies. I would like to pull this paper all the way up off the top here. Even though there isn't a lot of color there, I will be adding more color. So we'll just run it all the way up there. There, now we're touching the top. We'll give it a little spray. Now I'm thinking about adding some of these really lovely decorative. You can see the ones here with some of the strings. Oh gosh, these are so beautiful. And the strings add a lot, especially to the butterfly. So I think what I'm going to do is I want to add more color down here. The pinky tone. So I'm going to add that pinky tone right there. So now the color of the paper is actually a consideration. I'm going to put this paper where I want that color. And in this case I wanted some pink there. And this paper also has a cut straight edge. So I'm going to line that cut edge up here with the edge of the butterfly. There. Let's see if we can find another cut edge here. Here we go. And we'll line that part up over here, right along the edge. Oh, I like that. It won't hurt to pull a little of that pink up into the yellow. A little up into the yellow here. And then I have this kind of a soft purpley color here. That would really look nice on this one. So again, I have this straight edge. So I'm going to line up the straight edge here. strings are hard to break. There we go. Here's another straight edge. Line that one up. We're just going to let these strings go wherever they want to. Let them have a mind of their own. And I want to add more strings, so I'm just going to arbitrarily set that on there. As soon as I wet it, it's on there. And these will all be glued later. So I'm not even going to worry about gluing anything down until I'm sure it's where I want it to be. So that's what I like about this technique. I do all of this just free. And I'm not encumbered by having to make decisions about what's going to be glued down and what isn't. I just simply put it down and make that decision later. So I'm going to add a little more purple in there. I think I'd like a little purple in his body too. So let's stick that there. Some here. So we're adding lots of nice texture right now. Now this is a real special paper. You can see it's got that gold that's been drizzled onto it. So if I want to get the benefit of that gold, then what I need to do is simply rip that out. So see, if I want to add a little element of this gold along the edge here, I can simply rip it, lay it down, and then later we'll be concerned about whether or not we want to keep it or move it somewhere else, and we'll glue it at that time. But I like that look with the little bit of outlining there with the gold, and because this paper is white, it's also adding back some lights for us. So that'll help define that, that part of the butterfly. Let's put it over here too. You can tell we're doing this video in the winter. There's snowmobiles out my door here. Let's carry this theme up into the other butterfly here. Okay, now I have to decide. I would like to add another gold element here. I think I might go all the way to the black. Same idea. Only this time I'm going to be adding a very dark part. This is the edge of the paper, so it's giving me a crisp edge. Ooh, that made a nice connection. Now I'm kind of ripping some scallops here. We'll carry this up around the edge here. So I like what this is doing. I think it's adding a nice touch. So we'll add a few more of those. Maybe I'll take advantage of this straight edge again and do a connection over here. Anytime you can see how the butterfly is getting much more defined now that I've started to add these darker elements. And of course it's gotten a little more exciting with that addition of the gold. There. Now that feels good. Let's close this one in a little bit too with a dark connection. Another dark connection up here. And I've got the benefit of this long, crisp edge. So I think I'll just simply define this edge right here too. There we go. Well, now we're ready to have a little more fun. Do something a little exciting. I found some of this wonderful deep purple. Ooh. I love this lightweight oriental papers that have holes in them like this. So I'm going to add this in here for some more darks. It's going to give us some nice stringy elements. So we'll put these here and there. Always thinking about how do these connect. I just don't want to stick them here and there and everywhere. I try to keep like a little rhythm, a little pattern your eye can move around. So you have small shapes, larger shapes. So we're just trying to get a nice little movement here with some of these darker shapes. And again, whenever I can, I try to go down and connect to the edge of the paper. So our paper's drying a bit. I'm going to take my fine mister, take that and that. So whenever your pieces are sticking, take your fine mister. Now don't take one that's got gangbusters, too much water. Like one like this, with a powerful trigger sprayer like that, that would be too much water. We're not trying to get this back to a very wet stage, we're just simply trying to keep it damp. So the fine mister does that for us. Ooh, this is fun. Now again, I'm connecting to the edge, coming across with some of these darks, moving through, moving through. I haven't said much about it, but I actually do look over here at my little design theme once in a while, and I'm thinking about the movement coming through. So I think I will pull a little bit more of these dark shapes moving up here. And maybe we'll have one even coming down here and connecting to the butterfly itself. There we go. Now, one thing I haven't done is I haven't stamped. And I think this would be great fun. This is actually a butterfly stamp that I designed. I drew the butterflies on here and just using, this is a piece of linoleum, very lightweight linoleum. And I'm just simply going to mix up some nice dark colors, maybe kind of in a purple tone. This is some permanent magenta. I think I'll add a little quinacridone burnt orange to it to deepen it a bit, and maybe even a little French ultramarine blue. And then I'm just going to with my flat brush, I'm just going to catch that edge. And I can even vary the color a little bit. Here, I'm going to go into just a little bit more of the French ultramarine blue, cool it off over here. I'll go into a little quinacridone rose, warm it up over here. And let's see what happens when we stamp this. I think this is going to be fun. Oh, cool. Still wet enough to soften out. Let's do another one. I'll just stamp the one. I like that. Take a little leftover color and just suggest it in there. Now you have to put the paint on fairly rich because it wants to resist this surface. So it can't be too watery. It's got to be a fairly rich mixture. This one I'm going to connect to the edge. Now I cut this in such a way that it actually goes off the edge there. There, coming in. See, I picked up my colors and put those back down. They're almost a perfect match to the color. So what I was hoping this would look like is just the suggestion of some other butterflies in the background. Let's do one more. I don't want to get too carried away. That's one of the problems with stamping. It's so much fun, you can't stop. So I think we did enough. Now it's time to come in and actually do some painting. And one of the things I want to do is I want to firm up this pattern that we were talking about. I definitely want to come in with just some nice fresh color. This isn't completely dry now, but it's a little bit drier. A little bit of time has passed. So I'm simply going to go back to my small brush and I'm going to start doing a little bit of direct painting, just to pull us into a little bit more of a, when it starts getting too abstract or too non-objective, then I feel you have to pull it back into a more representational look. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm going to make this little rascal over here come around. This is a combination of quinacridone gold, and I put a little quinacridone burnt orange in it. Kind of a nice warm earthy color. So I'm also going to pull this color up into the butterfly a bit too. You don't want it to look like the Maytag repairman there. Real lonely. So I'm going to pull a little bit of this nice fresh quinacridone gold up into this part of the butterfly. Oh, that feels good. So I'm just going to now play around with increasing some of the definition of each of these butterflies. Like I feel this needs a little more definition so you can see that it's moving down. Again, I'm working with a fairly small brush just to have the control. Just work with whatever size brush feels good to you. So now we've defined that wing just a bit more. Let's go a little darker, a quinacridone burnt orange, maybe with a little alizarin added to it. And we'll make these legs. These are really stringy looking legs. It's got another one over here somewhere. And I feel because I want this wing to look like it belongs to the same butterfly, I'm going to pull a little bit more of that gold color into these upper wings here. The upper tips there, brighten that up a bit. This gold has such a beautiful glow to it. And same with this other butterfly now. I feel like we really need to come back and identify, especially some of the darks. So I'm going back to my earlier mixture of alizarin crimson and phthalo green. These are complements. They're true complements. It's a red and a green, and it gives us a wonderful black. So a person doesn't really need to buy any black. You can just get black very easily. Just about any complement will give you some variation of black. So I'm going to simply come in here and play around with some of these patterns that are going to start making this look a little more like a butterfly. And one of the things I wanted to do on this butterfly was to create some light patterns where the lines are, where Whereas on this one, I wanted to create some of the patterns with a dark line. So for example, where this line is coming down, I'm going to keep it dark. Where it's going around some of these shapes, it's going to be very dark. But over here, I'm going to paint it negatively, so it will be just the opposite. And then there's all kinds of really interesting little patterns over here. So now this is simply a matter of direct painting. I'm designing the shapes, pulling it a little bit more into some realism. And then if I feel I'm getting too realistic, I'm going to pull it back into just pure design, into more non-objective. And again, we need to define this little rascal somewhere. Somewhere in this business in here is a body. So that needs to be defined. So I'm actually going to stop the camera for a little bit, and I'm going to do some of this direct painting that's going to identify the butterfly. Well, here we are on the next day now. Everything is totally dry. I mentioned that I was going to come in and just do a little bit more design work on the butterfly so that we could see more of the design elements. And so now what we need to do is pull the painting together. And we need to put in some of the dark and light patterns that were discussed in the very beginning. So you can see right now, this is competing with this. I think we need to simplify and pull a few more darks through. And then where the painting is already, the butterflies especially, are quite dark, I'm going to leave it lighter. And then where it's quite light, I'm going to come in with a few darks. So we're going to be working with that transposition of dark against light, light against dark. Now these are the colors of the archival papers that I've chosen to do the finishing. So you can see there's a lot of lovely open textures, and these are the ones you saw me using earlier. And then these were the accent pieces that I used to pull in some of these golds. So now we're ready to do the gluing. And to do the gluing, you can use matte medium, and you can mix it with a little bit of water. But I have found the matte medium, and especially the gloss medium, leaves a resist. So when you're gluing down the papers, and then you come back to paint later, you have that resist where the glue overlapped the papers a bit. So the product I'm really happy with, and I realize this is going to be backwards because we're looking under the mirror. The product I'm really enjoying right now is called Yes Paste. And when you buy it, it's very thick. It's literally a paste. So what I love about this is it leaves no resist later. When you glue, you can go beyond the part you're gluing, and it's simply, there's no resist at all. You can paint later, and it's like you're painting on the brand new paper. But what I love is it's very thick. You can see it's just as thick as the paste we used to get as a kid. And so now, when we want to start gluing these down, we can simply pick up these thick papers and put this thick paste on them, just like the old days. When we put this down, it's in place, and it's going to stay there forever. So these really do stick pretty well. So you can see I'm using the paste at its full intensity here. I'm putting it on the back side, and then I'm simply going to place these back where I want them. And then if I decide that I want to rip a few new ones, I can just simply go ahead, rip these out, and at this point, put the glue on them and put them down directly where I want them. So you're probably wondering, well, why didn't I just do that from the beginning? And I could have, but I just like to do the piece all a prima. I like to see if I like this. And if I like it, then I'll glue it back on. But generally at the end, I end up doing a lot more gluing at this stage And you'll see I'm going to be adding some more papers. Now the other thing that's really wonderful about this paste is I can now dilute it. So you can see I'm adding water, and then I'm going to take my 1-inch, this is a brush that I use to paint with, and this glue is so easily cleaned up that I don't even have to worry about destroying my good brushes. So I'm simply going to take water and mix it with this paste. And it actually takes quite a while to do this because you want to get, see right now it's still a little bit too lean. We want to get an adequate amount of glue mixed in with the water that it's going to penetrate the paper and glue it down permanently. Now in the old days, when the Yes paste first came out, there was a concern about its archival qualities, but I'm happy to announce that the company has now corrected that. So be careful when you're using this product that you can read on the side, non-toxic, water-based, acid-free for archival work. And the earlier product doesn't say acid-free. So make sure you're using that because I think it's really good to be concerned about using only acid-free products for this. Now this is where the excitement comes in. This is my favorite part. Wouldn't believe it, but I really love gluing this down. The color, when it dries, becomes much lighter. And you go, oh no, what happened to my painting? But when you glue this down, watch what happens. The color comes back to the full intensity. So make sure you're getting enough glue on here to really soak through the paper all the way and bond it to the surface. And I don't have to worry now about the resist factor. You can see I'm just slopping it on here. Oh, look at the depth of color that's coming back. And because I'm using Arches paper, I don't have to worry about activating any of these colors. They will not reactivate. So I just simply, because these papers are so lightweight, and remember the original paper I used, this is the Enroux. It's only 10 grams. You can see my hand right through it. This paper is so lightweight that I can simply put this glue, which is now, you can see there's a lot of glue in it, but it's still very liquid. And I can just simply put this down, make sure it's penetrating, and in just a very short time, we're going to have a lot of wonderful color come back. Oh, look at that glow. This is good. And in here too, you're going to see a lot more depth of color. Now all of these pieces I have to pick up, and I'll do that outside of the camera time. But all these very lightweight papers, I'm simply going to run this glue right over the top, and we're going to be ready to start coming in with those final washes when this dries. So I think you pretty much have the idea how important it is. Use the right product. Glue this down, do a really professional job with it. I look like I'm just slopping it carefree here, but I'm very, very careful that this, I'm not leaving any little air pockets. If you don't completely glue this down, you're not going to get that full color, that full intensity on the color. Okay, so this will be dry, and we're going to do the final wash to wrap this up. I'll pretty much stick with a purple wash in the background here. So by using my quinacridone rose and some French ultramarine blue, I can make a beautiful range of purples, ranging from a warm purple to a cool purple. So let's do a nice warm purple in here. So we'll kind of outline the butterfly, bump into that. Paint around that a bit. And then whenever I want to lose an edge, it's so easy. You just come in with clean water, start beyond that line, and just lose it. If you start with the line of paint, you just keep pushing it forever. So it's much better to do it like this. So like I say, we're attempting to pull this together. Let's link that to the edge. Maybe pull that right through there. Kind of simplify it a bit. I did get out my little Prismacolor sketch there just to see if there's anything in there that's guiding me. I've been thinking this guy looks like he's ready to land, but I think we need to give him something to land on. I'll pull a little more color up here. And we can even go darker. These little shapes that I added are so dark that they almost need a little more darker value next to them to link them together. I think they're a little bit, there, that's good. So now we have a nice dark shape. Let's move that through here. Link it right here. Move this shape across here. Connect, connect, connect. We're always thinking about how can these shapes connect. I might pull a little bit of this color up here too. And I keep going between warm and cool. I'm going to warm this up a little bit now. So I just put a little bit of quinacridone rose in it. And then often what I'll do when I get to the edge is then I'll cool it off a little bit. So maybe over here closer to the edge I'll put a little more blue in it. I could actually pull this color right off the corner here. I did want a dark corner. I keep reminding myself of that. I think I want it a little bit darker here as a contrast to this light. So I'll just get a little richer color. I'm just pretty much sticking with these same colors. So this is that same purpley tone. Go down, link that to the bottom. Maybe pull it around the corner here a bit. And then I'm going to wet my brush, lose this edge, and maybe lose this little bit of the white corner, just soften it a bit. And we'll go right off the top there. I don't want to lose this light passage here. I think that's important. Now the other thing I can do is I can do a little additional stamping. I think I will do that. So I'm going to take my flat brush. I'm going to take these purpley colors and I'm just going to run this across. If you use a round brush, you can actually fill in the area the relief area. And we just want to get color on this very top surface. All right, that's pretty cool. So let's make sure this is dry enough. I'll do another stamp over here. Maybe one more. It's very, very easy to get carried away with this. So if you decide to do some stamping, use some restraint. Okay, one last stamp right in here. Good, and see, it's picking up the pattern that we see in the butterflies. It's helping to fill in this block of color that's moving along. Now, if you get some areas you feel, oh, I went too dark, oh, I shouldn't have gotten that dark. One thing you can do is you can start taking some of these papers, such as the enroux, or in these little holy papers, and you can glue these down. They get completely transparent during the time you glue them, but they actually become white again later. So let's say I decided I wanted to add some more, almost like a flower here that he's landing on. I can just simply take and glue some more of this paper down. Depending on what color it is, that's the color we're going to get. So I think adding a little ink in here will be good. And it gets brighter as it dries. So don't think you've lost it when you do this. You have to completely penetrate that paper so it's completely saturated, and then that will just pop right out later. And we also have some lovely green here. Now I did plan to put more green into this picture, and it turned into a pretty purple one. And I'm not sure we need the greens. I think we'll just let that go. And let's say we're as done as we need to be for this video. So I'd like to just take a second and show it off in a mat. Any picture with the theme of abstract or semi-abstract definitely looks better in a mat. So you'll see the difference. There. So that'll be a wrap up for our butterflies. I hope you enjoy working with this theme. Now, this is not necessarily a semi-abstract piece, but I just brought it out because I just wanted you to see how I like to work. I like to work filling the whole page. And I do think of this as sort of a semi-abstract interpretation because it isn't necessarily realistic. And I'm just designing a background pattern of color to pop out what's here. So some things are dark against light and some things are light against dark, that kind of a concept. So this is one way I like to work. Another way I like to work is to work with this idea of the breakouts. And I got hooked on this and I just can't seem to stop. Now this is a very strict way of working. After you paint the flowers, you actually have to mask them and put tape around here. It's a very graphic art style of working, and it really takes a lot of concentration, measuring, being very precise. So what I want to do today is take away this very precise mat. There's going to be no masking, no taping. We're just simply going to go for it. But this is a fun way to work. You can see the lost edges, the found edges, the light against dark and the dark against light. We'll still work with that concept, but not with the strictness of all this taping and masking. Just another example of that. So this is more like what I want to do. I still want to work with the idea of some breakout shapes, but we're going to start by doing an underpainting where we repeat the color of the subject. So notice if you're doing red poppies, I'm going to put red in the background. If you're doing a color, something with yellows or purples, you want to repeat that color in the background. Same with the greens. The greens become part of the background as well as the foliage. And then this designing of the shape within a shape is just a little extra bonus. Now here's one that I haven't actually designed in the shape yet. This is still a work in progress. And my plan is to come in and maybe create some crisp edges here and there, create some darks. And what's really fun about doing these crisp edges is all of a sudden you can make up a dark shape. See that? I can just make up that crisp dark to pop this out. But I don't have to worry how it ends. It ends along that line that I've created. Here you can see I can just make up a light shape and end it at the line. And you can make up patterns of light shapes and patterns of dark shapes, and they can go outside the line, inside the line. I've drawn in some poppies, and I don't want these poppies to be realistic. What's going to happen is we're going to break this up first of all with some shapes. So I think what I want to do, I always like to have shapes that are breaking out. So if I go through here, you can see this one's breaking out and this one's breaking in. That's pretty nice. So let's start right about there. And it's always wise to measure. So it wouldn't hurt a bit if I do that line. And the other thing is you don't have to make it perfect. Maybe you want them to be kittywampus. Well, as it turns out, I did a pretty good job of guessing. So without going through the flower, I'm going to draw up to, and that's it. So now we've created one breakup, and that's kind of nice, kind of a 2/3, 1/3. And I think we'll come through here with this little corner breaking out. I kind of like that idea. So we'll move down here. Hope that's straight. Now I don't want this to be divided into equal. So again, I might keep this one in and this one breaking out. Or I could come way over here. What are we going to do? We could break them. They could both break out, but see, that's getting kind of close again. I think I'll do this. I'll just have a little tip of this breaking out. And again, I'm going to just give myself a little security here by checking the distance. Believe me, if you have to correct these later, it's very difficult. So we do need to change that one a bit. There we go. And again, don't draw the line through the image, much better just to let it happen. Let's come down here a little further. You'll notice I do have my handy dandy eraser on now. So any extra lines that are not necessary, I always try to get them erased before I start, because one of the problems with this graphite, once you wet the graphite, you actually cannot erase it later. So it's always better to erase any unnecessary lines before you start. I think I want that similar kind of idea with going out. I think I'm going to go out down here too. This one I can kind of eyeball. Again, I don't want to go through these shapes. Now, do I want all of these stems coming out? I think I do. Maybe this one will end on the line. So erase that. I think I'll have this one end on the line. So we'll erase that. But I think what I'll do is I'll add some kind of a dark, some little foliage, some kind of a foliage coming up and interlocking, crossing over the line. Very important to have things crossing over the line. Now this is getting to be right in the center of the paper, so maybe we can add another one over here, coming up, reaching over, this kind of a thing. So see how much better it is now? This is open, this is broken up with some foliage. And I think what I'm going to do is make an adjustment up here. I think I'll have a breakout going here. Again, I'm going to erase this line. It's okay to change your mind. It's kind of fun that way, actually. Then I'm going to have this area right here breaking out. So let's see what happens. We'll draw this line. Not through the image. There we go. That's kind of cool. I think we'll just leave that. Erase the extra line. Now we're ready to start. So I do like this kind of movement. It's not precise like I've been doing. It's more of a zigzag. And we may even come up with something that will go out beyond that border. In fact, I wouldn't mind right now taking a minute and maybe drawing another shape that would come up here. See there, we were forming a tangent. I'm just going to erase that a little bit. And maybe we could add like a little bud or something that would take your eye up here. And I always like to show the thickness of the stem, because these become dark and light patterns as you're building it. See, that's better. Now we've got a nice open area here. We've got the small next to the large, zigging and zagging and zigging off the page. So we're ready to start. This is great. Okay, we're ready now to put some color down. I'm going to dampen all the colors, and of course I'm going to clean up. I always like to start with a fresh palette. I know that some of you now had maybe a Catholic upbringing, or who knows, maybe you went through the Depression, but get over it. I want you to start with a nice, fresh palette of fresh colors. Probably going to start with kind of a primary thing again. I want to put in some nice yellows. Don't worry about the lines. We're just simply going to have some fun doing an underpainting here. So I'm going to touch the edge. And when I do this, I'm going to work my way through. See, I don't really want to, and I want the flowers. So I'm kind of avoiding them. Of course, some of that color is going to flow in there. That's what it's going to do. And that's okay too. And then I'd love to have a nice little glow down here. I always think of this as the sun just came out. So I almost always put some yellows in my flower paintings. It's always a good idea to bless your painting. Let's go into a little of that beautiful quinacridone gold. Again, it's just a harmonic color. I'm not going to put the gold where my whites are, because I still want to save some whites. But I am going to put the gold where my yellow is, because this is a harmonic color. So if I put a little gold in with the yellow, it just makes the yellow area a much richer area. So think harmonically in this underpainting. Think about the zigs and the zags that you can create as you move through, in and out. Now don't paint anything of your subject. Stay away from your subject. We're only painting the background. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it's very important to repeat the subject in your background. So the next thing I want to do, and I'm going to take some quinacridone rose or permanent rose. It's the same color, different brand names. So I'm going to give this paper a little chance to stretch a bit. See how that flattens it out so nice? And now we're ready to come in with some of this color. It could be anywhere. Let's go up here. You can touch into the pink. Let's pull it down through here. Notice I'm painting around the stems, through the line, touching the edge. Now that one I ran into the yellow, but let's try this one into some of this nice pure white. Ooh, that feels good. And I never just do it in a spotty way. I try to get movement, zigging and zagging. And we can even tip it a little bit if we want the color to move a bit and blend. And now I'm ready to think about adding a third color. And you know how I love these primary colors, so I think I'm going to cool it down a bit now. Only this time I'm going to use my manganese blue. Manganese gives some beautiful granulation. It's kind of a new color in my palette. I haven't used this color very much. So I'm going to, as it bumps into the the pink, of course, I'm going to get some purples. I like that. And as I go between the colors, sort of a negative way of painting. See, I'm leaving those stems light. I might darken them later, but for now I'm making them light. As I paint on the yellow, you can see what's happening. I'm starting to get what looks like a nice green. So maybe now I'll start interpreting this into what could be some obvious grasses. Oh, that was fun. Mostly I'm just thinking in terms of color and value moving through the background. But if I can interpret this to become part of the elements we're dealing with here, which happens to be some flowers, some foliage, that's good too. So see, I'm thinking foliage again. If you're next to a flower, bump into it. Negatively paint around it. I'm going to wash my brush out again, and I think I'm going to pull this color right down into this, going off the bottom here. Now remember, I'm still trying to save some whites. I don't want you to completely lose all your whites. Maybe I can pull just a little bit more blue up here. So I'm going to start in here, go around, pull it up here. And notice because I'm into the pinks and the yellows, it's starting to gray down a bit. That's okay too. Just pull a little bit of that very soft blue into the background. Break that up a bit, a little bless it again. So there's my underpainting. That's just a real basic start. Now what I want to do is create some textural things. I want to move it into more semi-abstraction. Right now it's still looking a lot like perfect poppies. We can't have that. So let's take and stretch some of this gauze, and it can go right through the flowers. It can touch off the edge. Let's see what kind of wonderful textural qualities we can create here. So again, I don't want it to look like a piece of gauze. If it looks like a piece of gauze, you're in trouble. I want this to become simply a linear effect. There, ooh, that was fun. Let's pull that off. That's good. Actually, I like that. Let's do something down here. Let's start over here. Pull it across. Zigzag down a bit. Ooh, that's exciting too. Got some nice textures happening there. So I'm just sprinkling in a little bit of the popcorn salt at this time. And we'll just let this dry. When I come back, we'll take everything off but the en route, and then we'll go about finishing the picture. Well, we're ready to start playing around with our lost and found edges here. Finding some shapes, losing the edges on others. That's a very important technique, one that I think we need to cultivate because it's a technique you'll use always. So for example now, if I want to come in here, identify this edge where my pencil line is, what I want to do is I want to have this edge being identified. Oops. And as I move along here, I want this edge to get lost. So by just taking water and losing that edge with water, the only edge that's really identified at this time is the one I just put in there. Now we can do that with some blues and greens. I'll take some of my Antwerp blue and I'm going to use some of my Quin Gold. And this makes the most beautiful green. It's one of my very favorite greens. Quin Gold, Antwerp blue. So let's say we decide to come in here now and pop out. Let's get a little darker green. Pop out the edge of this flower. And maybe we'll want to do some suggestion of foliage in here too. Now we're bumping into the edge of a stem. Over here we're bumping into the edge of a stem, so we'll negatively paint around that. But here we're bumping into the edge of that line. So this is what we want to do. We want to think about all these things at once. Here we're bumping into another flower. We're going to come down here. We'll bump into the top edge of this flower. And now we're moving around the edge of this flower. Maybe we'll come over here too. Come up here along this edge. Maybe we'll switch into a little more gold color here. Add a little in here too. And then we'll wet our brush, shake out the extra water, and let's just lose this edge. So it's now a lost edge. That's good. And we have to keep coming in with clean water, so we're not going to see any of that edge. Okay, let's get back down here now. We're going to pick up the other side of this. Let's go a little darker. I think I'm rushing. Not doing a very good job here. Yeah, that's better. Now we could even switch into this kind of nice Antwerp blue. So I do like to keep changing color. I don't want it to be the same thing all the time. You can see we're going here from the yellows into greens. Here a very dark green. I want to carry that very dark green over to the other side. Now we've got a dark green moving along here, but now I'm going to move into a little bit of the French ultramarine blue. And every time I run into a stem, I simply paint around it. Very easy negative painting style here. But now, I don't want to just keep going forever with this. What do I want to do? I think I'll switch back into a green. Let's do that. Leave a little nice wet into wet edge there. Carry it through a bit. Now we're bumping into another stem. This is actually turning out kind of fun. Now I think I'll go back into the blue. So I purposely keep changing color. And now when I get next to this edge, this line, I have permission to stop. That's what I love about working with these lines. It gives you permission to stop in the middle of nowhere. So at this point, I'm going to lose all the edges that aren't meaningful to me. So I'm going to come in with clean water, start up here beyond, and then bump into this and just let that color melt away. Same down here, and let that color just melt away. And in here too, just lose it. So we've created an interesting little dark passage here. And now maybe it's time to think about reversing this. Let's stick with our colors here, the Quin Gold, a little bit of Antwerp. And I'm going to have to turn the picture here. This time, let's go on the outside of this line. Paint around this stem that's poking out. Now we're bumping into this color that I just painted earlier. And if I want to, I can just switch into a little cobalt blue here. Nice soft blue. Bump it into the green. So we'll turn that green into a blue, and we'll melt it out into the white. Just water. You just keep melting it. We'll melt this into the red. Well, that was fun. We just had a nice little reversal there. Now it is a bit of a halo, about the same distance all the way around. So maybe I'll suggest something, a little something to break it up a little bit differently. Maybe I'll even throw a little salt in there. That'll be good. Now let's start looking around the picture here and deciding where we would like to make some other changes. We're working inside here. I think I want to come down here and do a strong, dark inside pattern. But I have drawn in here some of the foliage that's coming up from the bottom. So I'm actually going to paint around that foliage. Now this is still wet from before. I kind of like the way that's just melting out all by itself. So we'll come up here and negatively paint around these, stop at the line. And all these little linear shapes and textures are just there, just to enjoy. Let's start going into a little more golden color here. Carry that across. There's another foliage. I know you can't see my drawings from where you are. There's another piece of foliage sticking here. So we'll just let that happen. And now we'll just start losing this edge. And let that remain a nice light color. Cross it over here a bit. We'll just allow this to kind of vignette out into the edge here. Wet our brush, just lose it. That's good. Here too, if we want a little more added texture, we could just add a little salt and some of that. Now I think I'd like to do another reversal. We went outside here. Maybe what we need to do is come up here and make this a little bit darker. Now I generally like to stay in the color that's already here. So we have this lovely blue. This is my French ultramarine again. So if I want to, we can just come up here and negative around this a bit. Come over here. Go around that a bit. If we want to, we can charge in just a little bit of green, just for variety. And then I'm going to wet my brush and I'm just going to let this melt right out. Back into that lovely light area. Same here, I'm going to melt this right out. And as I move along, I'm now going to pick up this red tone. I'm going to accent the red over here, come in, round. So you can see how easily you can just keep changing color. If we want to, we can even sprinkle a little red into that, break it up with some more texture. Purple it up a bit. Oh, this is way too fun. But I want to carry that blue-red theme around, turning into the green. And And this is such a beautiful color. That's that Quin Coral. Let's pull that in here too. Now when you paint on the paper, of course it's going to get really dark. So don't panic. And it's a little harder to lose the edge on the paper too, but it can be done. Let's pull that red. I don't like to end something on the top. Let's pull that red right down here. Go around the shape of that. And then lose the edge. So this is coming together very nicely. I think we need to get darker here, and I think the color we need to add is some of that dark green. So it's my combination of Antwerp and Quin Gold. So let's come over here and darken this a bit. And if we want to, we could even suggest some of those prickly shapes. But once again, once we've identified the line we want to, let's come in with our clean water, lose the edges. So that worked out quite nicely, very suggestive. Now down here I want to come in with some strong dark shapes. So I'm going to take the gold. This gold and Antwerp blue make the darkest, most beautiful darks. So we can now design some of this foliage that will come right off the bottom. Here we can end the foliage where it's turning into the light. That's kind of cool. Again, we'll negative around that stem. Remember, I added another one here because it was too much in the center. So now we got our something happening in layers now, in transitions too. Now one of the things I want to start thinking about is getting some of these stems dark against light. So let's do that right now. We're going to wet this stem. I'll just wet it with some water. Then I'm going to come in with just the golden color. In fact, I'm going to switch to my Winsor yellow. Put a little Winsor yellow on here. And then we'll come in with our Antwerp blue. So now we're going to have a dark stem against the light background. That feels good. A little dark against light, light against dark. We'll lift away a little bit of color. I think it got a little bit dark. And then whenever I'm painting a stem, I like to add just a little bit of the color of the poppy. And these poppies are probably going to end up being nice bright red. So let's pull just a little bit of that red into the stem. I also like to do it while it's still wet, so the colors can blend a little bit. So we'll just pull a little bit of that color into that. Some of that we can edit. Well, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to paint a couple of the poppies themselves. And because I'm just going to use a very formalized way of painting them, I'm not going to paint them all in front of the camera, but I will paint a couple for you right now. So I'm going to start with some nice clean water. And what I like to do is wet the shape first. So using about a middle-sized brown brush, I'm going to wet one petal at a time. One petal at a time. So we'll wet around the shape. It becomes what I call a Chinese jigsaw puzzle. You do a petal here, and then because the edges are wet, you come down to a petal here, and then you do a petal here, and move around the picture. Then when this petal dries, then you can come back and paint the petal next to it. But I do want you to paint each petal separately. And my formula for painting poppies is pretty much a nice bright yellow. This happens to be Windsor. So I'm going to put this color down separately. And I'm thinking about the light now possibly hitting on top. And then I'm going to come in with Scarlet Lake, which is an extremely bright orangey color. I'm just going to put this color down. Next. And I often see these little shapes where the light is hitting. I always call them accordion pleats. I don't know if that's a proper term. But so I'm going to put this bright orange, and then at the bottom I'm going to use my quinacridone rose. So with this combination of three colors, that's usually how I get the poppy color. I'll just let those colors get acquainted. Let a little of the pink run into the scarlet, a little scarlet run into the yellow. And then sometimes if I feel I need a darker color at the bottom, I'll come in with my alizarin crimson. And I'll even mix a little bit of phthalo green in there to get that extreme dark. Because often there will be some of the pollen or whatever it is will fall into the bottom of the thing and it will become darker. Now we are starting to think a little realistic here. I think that's okay too, because we're pushing and pulling it with all these shapes around it and all these lovely textures. So let me do one more. Let's go out here. This feels good. It's way out into this white area. This is really going to pop. Same idea. I'm going to start with the yellow up here because I want it lighter. My light source is coming from the top. Then I'm going to go into the orange. And then I'm going to go into the permanent rose in the shadow area. And I will give those colors a chance to mix. So the key is wetting it first. Oops, I better tip this one the other way too. And then again, if you want that extra dark, you can just come in with a little alizarin at the bottom. That'll give you that extra dark color. Okay, now we're ready to move in for our final evaluation of our semi-abstract flowers here. And I did, a lot of this while we were away from the camera. But I still want to do just a little bit more for you. So here's a little refresher. I first of all wet each shape just with clean water, carefully going around the edges. And then I usually have to go around one more time because the edges tend to dry. And I found out a long time ago when I tried to paint poppies that I just couldn't put down yellow and Windsor red and expect them to maintain their own integrity. The Windsor red would run all over. I had no control. So I found out that I could go to, you find out which colors move in water after a while. And the Scarlet Lake doesn't move very much. So it's perfect if I'm looking for just a soft orangey color. It's not too soft. So I'm trying to make it soft, that's why I said that. This is actually a very bold color. But you can see it's not really running and filling that in. I get to have the option of smoothing it out. And I might just do that. I want that transition to be just a little softer, so now I've just got a brush with just with water on it. And then I'm going to go into my quinacridone rose, excuse me. You can see what I'm trying to do, and what's really fun is after you've done the previous petals, each petal gets to be more fun because then you start looking for contrast. So you can see I'm getting a fairly good contrast here with the permanent rose or quinacridone rose. I still need a little better transition here. I soften that with a little water. But I still want it darker yet. So now I'm going to go into my alizarin crimson. Alizarin crimson is the darkest value red that I have on my palette. And you can see that that's giving us a much nicer and much darker. So this is what we're looking for. The light against the dark. Here we have the dark against this mid-tone. Here I have a light against the dark. All the way around, you can see I put the darker value in here to contrast the lighter value. And so each petal is a continual evaluation. Should I go lighter? Should I go darker? And now is going to come the fun part. This is the part I couldn't wait to show you. Now I'm going to take a little smaller brush. This is my script brush. I'm going to take a mixture of alizarin crimson and phthalo green. These are complements on my palette. And when you mix these two together, you get a black. If I want a really warm black, I'll just add a little more alizarin to it. And this is what I would use to make those dark pistils and stamens. And see, there's even some showing over here too. And if I want to, I can even fill this in, and this will give me an even darker value over here. Those little edges coming out. So it's these little final touches that really pull the picture together. Almost all these shapes in here are much darker. We could even come in here with a few little darks. This could be darker. So the final thing you do is this constant evaluation. What can I do that will create contrast? Where can I perk it up a bit? Could maybe even add a few in here. They're always kind of peeking out. Now these I painted when it was extremely wet. You can see what's happening there, softening it up quite a bit. So when that dries, what I'll do is I'll just simply put some crisp ones on top of that. So we're pretty close now to being done. It would look so much nicer if I just do one more here. So I'm going to do it. Now this one, this is where some of you may get a little frustrated. When you're painting and you are bumping into those little unroot papers that you glued down, and see I have an unroot paper running through here. Be prepared for things, strange things to happen. It's going to get darker. It's not going to handle the color the way the paper does. So just enjoy that. That's what makes it look a little more semi-abstract. Now I expected more strange things to happen here, but it's looking kind of ordinary. What's going on? We'll just soften that a bit. I'll just lift a little color so you can see that shape going through there. See, I like things like that, those little surprises. And we'll go into our pinky color. And then we'll ultimately go into our dark alizarin down here. So we're very close to a finished painting. I always like to do a lot of lost and found edges and cleaning up this and that. So off the camera I'll certainly do a little bit more to finish this up. But it's close enough now for us to put a mat on it. See how it looks. Now this is a traditional 22 by 28 mat, so we're actually losing a little. I forgot about that when I was designing it. Probably one of the things that would have made this a little stronger is if part of this went right off the page. I may just move it over like that. See, I like it when things link with the edge of the paper. I could even do that up here. See, I could pull this down more. I actually like that better. With part of this flower touching off the edge, part of this touching off. I like this nice open space around this. And maybe one more little shape coming in here. But that's it. I hope you enjoy this technique. Okay, next demonstration. And a lot of what we're doing with the landscape demo is going to be similar to what we did with the butterflies. Just a different subject, a little different approach. We're going to be adding some new tools for texturizing. So just thinking now about landscape, a lot of times I like to work from a reference, like something like this with those shapes, those very predominant shapes, the feeling of the light coming through. I might even try to capture some of that. Or here, this has got some beautiful movement through with the rocks, the water, and so on. This has a wonderful scope moving across. These are the kind of things I'm really looking for. The beautiful light and dark patterns, the colors, the values going from light to mid-tone to dark to very dark. In fact, you could even crop this into a very lovely semi-abstract composition. Look at that. It's got some very, very exciting possibilities. So I did blow these pictures up, so you're getting the benefit of a full 8.5 by 11. This is the kind of thing I'm going to be thinking of for today's demonstration. I'm going to work with the idea of maybe some rocky landscape, maybe some water cascading down, maybe some trees. We'll see what happens. And often I'll just work with simply a black and white subject. That, in a way, that frees you up even more. This is one of my very favorite subjects. This is actually a photograph, but look at the beautiful abstract design where the white of the snow has really come in this beautiful directional movement with some interesting breakups here. And the diagonals are repeated in so many different ways. I really love this, the idea of looking at the rocky shoreline with the roots reaching out, going into the trees. So who knows what's going to happen today, but that would be a lovely, lovely subject. I'm going to start with the same idea. I'm going to take and do a little value study very quickly. So it'll look something like this. You can see just simply thinking about my white design and thinking about the pattern of darks that we're going to develop. So I'm going to start with my full dark. This is the sepia again. And I'm going to work in a horizontal format this time. And one of the things I'm always thinking about is how can I design something that has interlocking shapes? Obviously I want these shapes to come around and connect and form other shapes, smaller shapes, longer shapes, little shapes. But eventually I want this to have a connection that goes all the way from the top to the bottom of my picture. Don't necessarily want to cut it in half, but I do want it to have this vertical connection. And then at the same time, I want it to have a horizontal connection. So if we move back through here and maybe design something else coming down, now you can see we have horizontal and vertical. And beyond that, now we can look at creating maybe some very interesting little patterns, going at more of a diagonal than that one shape there. Maybe coming up, maybe a very high horizon. Let's see what happens here. And then always we're looking to break up some of these shapes into smaller shapes. Now comes the real fun. This is a marker. These are the Prismacolor markers, and they come in different values. So this one happens to be a 30% warm gray. And in just a very short time, I can just come in here and play a little bit and maybe design in a few of these 30% values. Something as simple as just a little zig and a little zag that will take us through the picture and touch at various parts off the page. I don't want these things floating. I want you to come all the way to the edge and touch. And then using the 100% dark again, maybe I can come in here. How about if we have a dark up here in the high horizon? And as we move down, we can make some of these shapes dark. Again, coming out, touching the edge of the paper, looking for variety. Sometimes we want big shapes that connect. Maybe we'll have a nice strong dark shape coming through here. And some smaller dark shapes. And I don't become a slave to this. This is just simply a little exercise. And if you skip this, that's fine. You won't have any problem painting without it. But I just wanted to make, mostly, I wanted to make the point that it's important to touch off the edge of your paper. I want you to think about where is this going to touch off the edges. I want you to think in terms of whites, midtones, and darks. And once you do this little exercise, it's like, okay, now I'm ready. I'm ready to go for it now. These are some examples that you saw earlier, but this is the kind of thing that goes through my mind as I'm starting to paint. I'm thinking about color dominance. Now, because I was doing an interpretation of the caves here, I stayed with very earthy colors. You can see the raw siennas, the burnt siennas, quinacridone gold, quinacridone burnt orange, and then of course I went into some blues to gray those colors down. So we've got some of the blues turning into these gray tones. Now on this particular one here, you can see I stayed with a very cool dominance. The only warm colors really are some of the pinks and some of the almost orangey tones. And this one here, I decided to do very warm dominance. I've got the golds and the burnt siennas and then the purple. So I think for today, I'm going to work with a feeling of light. I'm thinking I want to create some light coming through the picture, through the center, going off into cooler. So I'm going to work kind of a warm to cool theme here. And I'm not going to wet the back of the paper. So I've already identified that this is the front of my paper. I'm reading the Arches France watermark here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start randomly wetting the paper. I basically want the sky kind of solid. So I'm coming in with some very, very wet areas. This is my 3-inch hockey brush. And I'm kind of throwing some of the paint too. And what I want to do is I want to create a pattern of whites by leaving the paper dry. And what this is going to do is going to give me some crisp edges and some soft edges. So we're going to start out with this light coming in. So I'm going to start right through here. This is some, excuse me, some Windsor yellow. And I'm just going to throw it right through the middle here. Ooh, this is fun. This is what I love about watercolor. I love to see the color just move in water. I think when I got bored with oil painting is when I worked with such thick paint and it never moved. I had to do all the work. Watercolor does half the work for me. So, now we've got our, I really wouldn't have to worry about that, but now I'm going to go into a little gold too. This is that quinacridone gold. It's such a beautiful color, I can't resist it. So I'm going to put a little bit of the gold in here. Moving away now from my light source. Remember, I was going to go warm to cool. The next color I'm going to use is going to be a red. So I'm going to use my quinacridone coral. And I'm going to start in here and just let that color blend into the yellow. And some of this the coral, I'm going to pull it right out to the edge. So lay a lot of color down, because you got a lot of water on this paper, and you want it to be, some of this is going to run right off. Once I start moving this stuff, it's going to run right off, so don't be afraid to put a lot of paint down. See, I might even connect a little bit of this. Hey, that was fun. Now I'm going to come in from the edges with my blue. So I'm using some cobalt blue. Coming in from the edge, I'm going to move this blue right through some of the red. Sometimes it'll be on the white paper, it'll stay blue. When it goes over the reds, it's going to turn into some purple. When it goes into the greens, it's going to turn into, or yellows, it's going to turn into greens. So we'll just see what it does. It's going to have a mind of its own. So now I'm coming in with the cool from the other side. You can see I'm getting some very crisp edges. So far this has all been cobalt blue. I'm actually going to come in with a second blue. This is my Antwerp blue. And one thing I like about Antwerp, it does have a little yellow in it. So the Antwerp gives you some beautiful greens. And it also gives you some wonderful darks. One thing about cobalt blue is it doesn't really give you good darks. It's very weak, has very weak tinting powers. So I often will use a little Antwerp for that reason. Now comes the fun. We're going to let those guys just take off. See what they want to do. I'm going to get a tissue handy or two. And when it runs off the edge, I'm just going to gather it up. I don't want to tip it too much because I don't want to get all my colors turning into gray. The more closely related your colors are, if you have chosen colors that are basically in the warm colors, it won't make any difference how much you tip and turn it, because when you use analogous colors next door to each other, they'll look beautiful no matter what you do. It's when you start going all the way across the palette, and see, I've got warm and cool on here, so it's a little higher risk. Okay, the next thing I want to do is I want to start coming in with the en route paper. If you'll remember, this is that 10-gram wonderful paper, and I've included with the video a little kit with the gauze and the paper in it. So this is the paper you're going to want to use. Now, as I put this paper down, and I like to start with the en route, because if I want this paper, if I like what's happening with these dark shapes, I don't want to have other things in the way, like the gauze and the whatever, wax paper. I'm going to put a lot of stuff on here. So I like to put this down first, and using little shapes, see, no matter where I put this, it absorbs the color and becomes dark. And that's the part I love. So I'm going to put some of these here and there. See, in some areas are already starting to dry a bit. So I'm going to keep my fine mister handy. If I see some of these edges starting to dry, I'm going to simply missed them. So one of the things I want to do is I want to start creating some patterns of dark shapes that are moving through here. I'm thinking landscape. All the while I'm doing this, I'm thinking landscape. Land forms. The way they move, connect. Reach down. Maybe there'll be some smaller shapes. These could be rocky shapes. So we use a variety of sizes, small sizes, that together, but I'm always thinking about how they move through the picture. See, like I can zigzag across here and come down here. So keep the movement going. Think about how they connect. Here's a lovely little nice big shape here with a straight edge. I'll put that there. Here we go. So the first thing I want to do is think about my dark patterns. And if you don't use this paper, it's really hard to get these darks. So I really recommend using it. It's so easy. You just put it down. It automatically grabs the color, gives you these lovely darks. Then you can just start playing with starting little patterns. See how I'm thinking about the movement and the zigging and the zagging? One of the elements we haven't used so far is gauze. And the gauze is really great. This is the gauze. You'll see you've got a little hunk of this in your kit. And this gauze is actually 6 layers thick. So we have to start by unwrapping it, all 6 layers. And once we get all the layers unveiled, then all we have to do is grab a little hunk of this and we can stretch it out. This is wonderful stuff. It's 100% cotton. It's not sterile, so if you break your arm or something, don't use this. This is what they use to make casts. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put this down, and then I'm going to use this to create a linear design. So when I put this down and pull, and it absorbs the color, you can see how fun this is. It literally is creating a wonderful textural design, but it is also creating some movement. Again, if your paper is starting to dry, then it's important to use your sprayer. So here you can see I'm going to spray this down a bit just because it was starting to dry. And as soon as this gauze is seated in the color, look what happens. It absorbs the color, and then as it dries, it transfers this color onto the surface. And I'm going to paint on it too. But what I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to create linear movement that is going to connect some of these dark shapes that we created with some linear movement. Well, now we're ready to have a little fun throwing a little paint around. I think I'd like to liven up a little bit of the yellow that's happening here in the center. So I'm just simply taking a round brush and I'm going to paint on top of some of this gauze. I might even paint in some of these open white areas. Now as I put this yellow over the green, obviously we're going to get some over the blue. I did that again. When I put the yellow over the blue, I'm going to get some greens, and that's good. I wouldn't mind developing what looks like maybe some trees. So let's try that. Now this is an area that didn't have any color. It was a white. So I'm just going to paint a little linear pattern over that. Now I'm thinking I'd like to increase some of the darks. Remember, cobalt doesn't have a lot of strength, so I'm going to use my Antwerp. I'm going to come in here and paint a few more darks. And it's going to give us a variety. It's going to go all the way from blue to green to a grayed down purple. So we'll just see what happens. So I'm not necessarily painting on top of the gauze or painting on top of the paper. I'm painting anywhere I want to. If you just paint on the gauze and just paint on the paper, I think it gets a little boring. Do both. If you do paint on the gauze, you're going to get a better linear pattern. So that's kind of what I'm concentrating on right now. Maybe making some tree shapes. Maybe a little movement, intensifying some of the color. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on a tilt. I'm going to just, I've got this short box of paper here. So I'm just going to tilt this a little bit, and now all my colors are going to slowly start running downhill. Maybe we can create some little patterns here. There's all kinds of patterns like that. If you fly in an airplane, you see them constantly. Love those little patterns. I always think I'm going to get some rest on the airplane, and the view is so pretty I can't stop looking out the window. Okay, so I'm also thinking about the connections. Now, a color I used earlier was this quinacridone gold, and I think I'm just going to add a little bit more of that. You probably wonder, why am I throwing so much color on here? But you know what? The colors dry so much lighter, 18 to 20%. So don't be afraid to push that color. See, in the drying process, you could be disappointed. So push it, push it, push it. Now the last thing I want to do is create some final textures using a combination of wax paper and saran wrap. And if you're happy with your painting the way it is, don't do this. This is simply one more way to make texture. And a lot of people use this for texturizing, and you may say, oh, it's been done too many times, I don't want to do it. But I think a little bit of this is kind of cool. So I don't like to put it on too soon. I like to wait and do this at about this stage where I'm in control. See, I can decide the directional movement of the texture, and I don't like the cut edges to show. So I'm very careful about that. Here you can see where it's really wet. I have to be careful. I don't like that texture as much as when it's starting to dry a little bit. So again, what I'm going to do now is try to carry this textural concept and connect it with what's here already. How can I move this lovely texture through the painting and connect it to what's already here? So let's keep the movement going. Let's think about that directional movement all the while. Oh yeah, I like that very much. We'll come over here and start another one. Now if your paper is too dry, this isn't going to do anything. There has to be a little moisture left to get these textures. See, this will be nice. It'll give us just a nice little subtle texture moving off the page here. Let me try a few more shades. We have a nice big area here. Starting to dry, so I like that even better. When it's starting to dry, you have even more control. See, I can just keep adding pieces, moving it along. Very subtle things happening here. Just a little texture. You'll notice when you put it on a dark color like this, it becomes darker. I think it would be nice to have a little related texture up here going off in a vertical shape going up. There. Coming through here. So we're almost done. But I don't just randomly stick these anywhere. See, I'm always thinking about the movement. How do they connect? How can we touch off the edge of the paper? See, now that's not doing anything. If I really wanted a little texture there, I would have to take my fine mister, gently mist it, and then I can come in, and when I touch it, I'll get just a subtle amount of texture. This one here needs a little subtle activation too. There we go. So now we'll get just a little subtle amount of texture up there. Now some of these areas where I'm seeing bleed backs, this might be a good area to come in with some of this and create an interesting texture. I'm not always a fan of these bleed backs. So this is a good time to do a little texture there. Ooh, that's much better, much more interesting. So if you were working with more of a rocky idea, then I would use the wax paper, because the wax paper gives beautiful rock-like textures. And I can show you what I mean. When I was doing this theme here with the rocks, a lot of these surfaces were created by using the wax paper, because the wax paper is definitely rock-like. But because I was working more with the theme of a big landscape, I decided to stay with this. Now the other thing you can do is you can feed color under here if you want. So I'm just going to do that now as a final death-defying act here. I'm going to take some of my gold and a little bit of quinacridone and burnt orange. And I'd like to work with the same color that's basically there. This is kind of an earthy color here. And with a little tilt, there's enough moisture under here, I can actually bleed this color right under. Let's see what happens. So we'll just put the color here, tilt it, and let it run. And it really can be, it can give some very exciting movement and patterns. Oops, there it goes. See how it's moving? That's really nice. We could do the same thing over here if we want. We'll put, here I'm putting gold. I'll let it run a bit. I can tip it this way too. So if you just touch the edge, let it feed underneath, and it will give you some added movement underneath. That's pretty fun. That gave us just another extra warmth in there. I like that. I think I might carry that theme just a bit here. Oops. Now if I want to, I can bleed a little bit of this gold and quinacridone burnt orange right underneath here. But see, I have to tip it. And when it's tipped, that color will flow right underneath there. So I'll just keep adding more. Let it go. I like that warm color. I like what that's doing. If it won't bleed one way, show 'em who's boss. Bleed from the other side. There it goes. So now we have a nice connection with those warm orangey colors going right through the center. suppose if I wanted to, I could carry it a little bit to connect over here. I do have one final depth-defying act, and that is I'm going to take a little bit of salt. Now salt can take over a picture, so be very careful. My recommendation with salt is I only use it in areas that are light. So in a few of these areas that are basically in a very light tone, I'll put a little bit of salt. So where I see a couple of very light tones, I'll put a little bit of salt. And now we'll just set this aside and see what happens. Okay, this is the underpainting for our landscape, and everything's dry, so this is like Christmas morning. First thing you want to do is take off all the things that are just throwaways. For me, all of the plastic, and if you use some wax paper, those can just come off and be tossed. Now some people like to glue the gauze down. I actually like to take it off, because generally it's a little more interesting than the gauze itself. So we'll take this off and just see what kind of textures we're under. Pretty subtle, and that's okay too. I think we'll be modifying this as we work towards finishing it. Now the one thing that I like about this particular lesson is that we do have these wonderful white shapes. And some of the whites are probably going to be a little bit too much. We'll maybe cut a few of those down. But what we want to do is start by getting our darks back. And by now you know how to do that. That's simply taking the Yes paste that's been thinned down. Oh, I love this. As soon as you put this down, you get the color back to its original depth of color. So again, be sure you're getting plenty of this on here. It's got to completely penetrate, and then it has to even do more than just penetrate. It's got to bond with the paper underneath it. So I press very hard when I'm doing this, and as you can see, I'm using my 1-inch flat. It's actually a good watercolor brush, but this glue is amazing. It will clean up and it won't damage your brush. So we'll get all these darks down here, regain them, get everything glued down, and then we're going to be ready to do some finishing. Well, now we're looking at our abstracted landscape, and it definitely needs some more structure. You can see where the added glue has now darkened a lot of these areas. And sometimes what I'll do, if I'm not sure if I like a picture or if I like the whole picture as a whole, I might even do something like this and look at it as a half sheet. Or I might look for a section in here that I feel has some stronger shapes. So I always have a mat or two handy and look at that possibility. Well, let's give it a try as a full painting. Now, one of the things I'd like to do with this is to continue with this semi-abstract idea and to add some, break it up into some other shapes. So I'm going to start here. Let's say we decided to add a strong horizon line here. We can simply block that in. This could almost fall into a body of water here. And then by simply coming in, and I like to stay with the same colors that I've chosen, but just a little darker variation of it. So for example, if we wanted to accent this, we could simply come in with a variation of this, paint up to the line, and then we have to decide how far do we want to go with this line. Do we want to come right across? And over here it's turning into a green. So over there I'm going to want to change that color a bit, but I still wanted to repeat a little bit of that before I got to it. So let's pull that through. Now we have to decide what we're going to do with this edge. Do we want to lose it? Do we want to carry it a little further? I think we should carry it down even a little further. Then we might consider losing it. So again, anytime you want to lose the edge, you simply come in, wet it. I want to get a bleed back, so I wet that whole area again. Now anytime I want to, I can just lose this edge by wetting it. I'm going to save that white for a little bit longer. Now over here I might decide to mix up a little green. I think I'll take my quinacridone gold, little Antwerp, and move in here. It's an awfully bright green. I think I'm going to have to tone that down a bit. I'm going to add a little French ultramarine to it. That will gray it down because French ultramarine has red in it. That automatically gives you a nice grayed down look. So we've kind of created a little basin here. If that white's a little strong, I think I'm just going to wet it and just let a little bit of color float in there. Cool it down a bit. It's an awfully white. Now at any time, we can, I don't think I continued this line. Let me get out my pencil. Now we can decide how far we want to go with this. We're kind of back into a purpley color here. So I think I'm going to come in with some purple. And go back into a little green blue here. Usually as I move to the edge, I like to cool things off. Keep the warmer colors in the center. So let's lose those edges. So now we've created a linear shape. I think we need to do some more of these. Let's start drawing in some more shapes here. Now it might be kind of fun just to continue with linear shapes. That would be a very simple and I think actually a pretty good solution. The other thing is we can do circles, we can do rectangles. I'm trying to get away from doing it absolutely square where we have to measure edges. Trying to keep it a little bit kitty-wampus. So I think I'll do that. I think I'm going to come in with kind of a kitty-wampus shape here. I'll just draw it in. And let's do another kitty-wampus. Maybe like this. Oops, that's almost getting to be too perfect. Can't have that. Let's do something like this, a little bit straighter. Maybe another angle coming like this. Another angle like this. I didn't mean to break those up in such equal shapes. Dear, oh dear. Let's pull another one down here and give that one definitely smaller shape. Now we can have some fun pushing and pulling this together with some lines. I'm going to go back into some nice grayed down blues. And right up in here, This is a mixture of French ultramarine blue and Antwerp. Some of these colors that were on my palette. What I want to do is come in, find the edges. Now as I move along and I see that I'm moving into a warm color, I'm going to move into a warm color. So I'm going to add a little permanent magenta. As I move along here, I see I'm moving into almost a golden color. So I'm going to add a little of my quinacridone gold. So you can do anything you want. And then I'm going to lose these edges again with just the water. It's already feeling a lot more exciting. Let's pick that same color up, move over here, tuck it into the corner here. Again, as we move along, look what's happened. We've come to a nice warm area. Let's pick up that color. That's my Quin Coral. Let's add a little purple to it. Pull that through a little bit more. See, it's a nice echo of what's up there. Lose that edge. So you can just play around with this whole concept. Here we could go into here. Let's warm that up a bit. Find the edge, move it around, lose the edge. Pull some of that color down here. Lose the edge. Let's pull that dark right out to the edge here. So we're going to do a whole series of lost and found edges. Now here we might want to just do, again, another reversal. If we were to come in with this, a similar color, we're in the neighborhood of quinacridone burnt orange, maybe a little gold. This time we could paint the inside. And as we move along, we can start getting lighter and lighter. We're getting into a warmer area. We can get warmer. And now we can wet our brush, shake it, come in and just lose that edge. So we're really starting to have some fun here, playing around, popping in some dark and light patterns. I think in here, we need to see that reversal again. Pull some of that nice dark gray, blue, green. But let's not lose our whites. Those whites are still nice. Let's pull a little purpley color out here as we're moving along. Wet our brush, lose it, lose it. If we want to here, we could pick up that kind of pinky color. Move it along. The pinky color is so pretty. I think I'm just going to continue to pull it right out to the end here. Get this back on track. Kind of used to working upside down and inside out. Forget I'm on the video. Okay, now I want to keep losing this edge there. So you can see how things are already changing quite dramatically. You want to work with your vertical and your horizontal shapes. I think it would be good to pull a dark shape up into the sky even. Let's see what happens when we do that. Be adding a little bit more of the ultramarine blue here. And I may decide to come back later and make that side even darker. Once it dries, you can just keep moving around anywhere you want. So I think we'll stop at this point because I'll show you the finished painting at another time, but I think you've got the information that you need to continue. Let's take a quick look in the mat. As always, semi-abstract pieces look so much better framed up in a mat. Well, you can see I've done a little work since the camera's been turned off. And to tell the absolute truth, this painting left me just a little bit bewildered. I wasn't quite sure how could I make this into an exciting abstracted landscape. So I had to start drawing on all kinds of different ideas. And one of the things I thought would help would be to continue with this dark light, lost edge concept that I was illustrating earlier. But I also decided that maybe what it needs is a little bit of this, the en rouge added to it. Now, you saw me add this first, and then we painted it, and it became a lot of these darker shapes in here. But you can also use the en rouge for the opposite reason. Not only does it form the darks, it can also bring back lights later on. So I really think that this adds an awful lot. So using just these little thin veils, and what I've done, you can almost see here, we've added some of these thin veils, and I've cut them and placed them where I thought they'd look nice. And then when you paint over them, these little thin veils, which seem to disappear, all of a sudden reappear as these real subtle little changes. So I'm going to just simply add one to show you that they really do disappear. And you wonder, well, what have I accomplished? But they kind of give this thin veil, and they do give you great textures later. When you're doing this gluing, it's very, very important that you glue it completely. So this is the Yes Glue, thin slightly, and when you put it down, you can see, you cannot see at all what you've done. It's totally transparent. It's totally bonded to the picture now. When this dries, it will look like this. It will go on, you can't see a thing. When it dries, it will reappear as this light veil. When you paint over it, you'll see these little transitions. So I really think this is a great idea, one that you might want to expand on. The other thing I wanted to mention, I thought the idea of saving these whites was such a great idea, and that is one thing I'm still very pleased with. But some of the whites become very stark, and having, you know, the white corners, it makes you wonder. So in my final evaluation, I just wanted to mention it'd be very easy just to simply wet some of these areas so you're not doing hard edges. And then, for example, in this soft blue area, I can simply pick up that same color, maybe even a little touch of the purple here, and I can simply move that color into this as a very subtle thing. So now it's just a slight shade, there we go. Not a total white. Oh, and here you can see even the, where I glued one of those up pieces of en rouge paper, and vertical movement I was talking about. Change there, as we will right here too. See how that little image is starting to appear. So if any of these white shapes you feel become too stark looking and detracting, simply wet them, tone them. Or in the case here, as I was developing this painting, I actually toned some of the white shapes with some subtle layers of color, which is what I plan to do with these as the painting develops. Now, one of the things that I wanted to do, I felt this very strong, all dark on one side, all light on the other side, was just a little bit too stark. So I'm very quickly going to dampen my paints. You know what I'm doing, you can hear the spritzing. I'm taking my fine mister, dampening the colors so that they'll be activated and ready to give me some nice juicy color. And I'm going to mix colors that are going to be appropriate for doing a wash in the sky area. Now I want to do kind of a purpley color over here where it's the pinks and purples, and I think I'll warm this up by adding a little pink to it. So there's a nice warm purple for this part, but then I don't want to put purple over yellow. Obviously, if I put the purple over this yellow, it's really going to gray down. So I think as I move along into that area, I'm going to stick more with some of the golds and possibly a little quinacridone burnt orange. And so I'm going to go between these two colors here. I'm not going to wet the paper, I'm going to create another crisp edge. So just simply coming in, maybe designing something that looks a little bit like a mountain shape. You can start breaking these up any way you want to. Just first of all, you have to find the top, lose the edge. Oh, fun, there's a paper there. I like what's happening there. And this is kind of a long shape. It could be that we'll want to break that up again. Maybe we could come in here, create another shape. So there's no end to the possibilities. You can make up these shapes, break them up any way that pleases you. But I usually keep with the same color area. So I'm staying in the golden colors here. Here you can see when I started breaking up some of the rocks, I went into more of the purpley greens. Here I went into more of the blues and purples. So this works for me, having kind of a rocky ledge in what would be a focal area of the painting, and then repeating these rocky shapes on some of these edge shapes. And then the other thing is I look for areas to simplify. To me, this helped to simplify. And then creating this shape and keeping it basically dark helped to simplify. And here now we have two similar color values. So it might be a good idea at this time to think about changing this into a darker value so this whole thing could be simplified into a solid dark. So what I would do is I would take a color that relates, and to me this warm quinacridone is going to do it. I'll follow that edge. So, I don't want it to be straight like that. I want to get some color variety. So now I'm going to take some of this warm quinacridone coral and add it. Oh good, and look what's happening. I'm getting a linear breakup from one of those papers I added. Over here I could add some gold to change it a bit. Over here I could go back into the coral a bit. This could turn into another rocky ledge here. And so it seems the further you go with these, the more you push them, throw the book at them. In fact, my favorite paintings usually are the ones that I wasn't totally happy with in the beginning, and I gave myself permission to try anything I could to save it. I love it when a painting works and you've got this wonderful, perfect painting and it was all easy to do. But this is truly my favorite, where I have to struggle a little bit and get everything but the kitchen sink out to make it work. One of my last favorite things to do is to take these watercolor aquarelle, it's called Karlyn. They come in oil-based and water-based. They're made in Switzerland. And I've had this box probably for 25 years. And in fact, I just replaced it. You can see these are fairly new. And I absolutely adore these things. So anytime I feel like I want to add a little opacity, add a little linear quality, I'll come in with these crayons. And for example, I took kind of an orangey color because it seems to work into this area. And if I want to, I can lighten things a bit. It's like stepping back in grade school. They literally are a crayon, but they're a water-based crayon. So I can subtly change the color a bit here if I want to make it even more intense. This is a yellow. Then the interesting thing is, if you want to, you can even change this by wetting it. Because these are water-based, they will actually activate, and you can move the color around and it becomes even more opaque. So there's a lot of times that this has saved my painting. These beautiful little crayons. We tried a little yellow, let's try a little purple over here. It's in the same color range, but it's going to add just a little bit of opacity, just a little color accent. And again, if we want to, we can wet it and just start getting a smoother look. And the good news is, if you don't like this, and you can just literally wipe it away too, because it's just sitting on the surface. I actually did like that though. I wouldn't have wiped it away except I had to, just for you. Well, this pretty much wraps up this part of the video, and we're at the end. And one of the things I'd like to do is to send out to you my hopes that all of these ideas and techniques are going to expand your skill level. They're going to be helpful for you to have the confidence and the freedom to express your own natural ideas. So I think watercolor is one of the greatest mediums, and I really hope that with just watercolor, transparent watercolor, and the use of collage and all these other materials, that it will open the door for you to have just incredible possibilities in the future. So happy painting!